Scribe in Black Press presents an unabridged recording of The Brothers Doom, a tale of We the Immortals by Luke Warfield. Read aloud by Luke Warfield. Copyright Luke Warfield, all rights reserved. Part 1. A quiet scene arises before us, though it shall soon be disturbed. It begins with a cabin, which, under the white circle of the moon, stands upon a tract of earth where an otherwise sloping ground, abounding in diverse evergreen genera, suddenly planes into a cleared parcel. The parcel, measuring 2 acres to the square, is cut by human design, whereafter the land descends sharply again in a succession of escarpments that, at length, terminate at the mountain's snow-capped brow. The overall sight of the picture, that is the moon, the stars, the mountain, its verdant grades and hoary vertex, as well as the self-same cabin at the focal point of all thereof, gives the impression of a grand pro-style preceding some ancient fane now lost to history. These were a few of the emergent notions Colt Doom considered as he pondered the collective elements of the above-mentioned image. Mere moments ago, Colt had turned his big bay horse off the trail for the brush, where, from that furtive position among the thickets, he drew out the field glass stowed in his pistol belt and glassed the total structure of the mountainside, starting, and then returning, to the homestead of interest. The building stood out like a sore on a man's face, and Colt held the glass to that landmark for a good measure without sound or signal. Of what could be ascertained in the current climate, the cabin was engineered with a simple design. The builder had organized the structure's walls with trunks of pine, stacked up to the height of a single story and beaver-tailed together at the corners. A chimney, mortared of numerous stone varieties, stood square and straight at the house's left flank, but, insofar as Colt could see, no signs of smoke curled up from that imperative vent, and neither did he espy any lamps or tapers burning in the window spaces, of which there were 2. Colt filed that fact, especially the lack of hearth usage, as a peculiarity, and he wondered if the proprietor was indeed out of the home this night. There were other strange paraphernalia scattered about as well. Queer rock assemblages, wooden statuettes, and a sweat lodge of some fashioning, but he was too far out to discern them clearly. The effects of the wizard's brew faded. Soon, Colt would be as blind as any man to set foot in foreign woods at night, and he possessed only one more dose of the potion. Colt set the field glass aside and drew out a cracked tin-type photograph and pondered the faces looking back at him. The photograph rendered the likenesses of 2 young men, fit and at attention in military dress, the smaller of the pair a younger, crisper representation of Colt's own person. But his gaze remained on the other man, the much larger specimen. Despite his immense size, the man unmistakably shared in the Doom family heredity. The man possessed a barbaric aspect, with big round shoulders, a heavy chin, and a thick neck that arose 1 head height over young Colt. Only the eyes betrayed a soul abounding in mirth, and mirthful he was in so far as Colt remembered him. What was he like now? So many questions. So much time lost. Colt put the photo away and reglassed the house. Though he had never called to the residence before, Colt knew well the mountaineer to whom it belonged, for that one and the same fellow was no less than his own and only brother, the very gentle giant rendered in Colt's beaten photograph, a man, to date, Colt had neither seen nor heard from at any point over the span of 12 years. Tonight, Colt Doom had climbed the mountain with the ambition to amend that issue, though not in a way their mother would have approved. For tonight, Colt Doom, age 33, purposed to execute a different kind of reunion with his estranged sibling, so named Jaith Doom, by striking a fatal blow against that brother and burying his deceased body under the ground once the enterprise was accomplished. Colt shifted the field glass back to the precipices and scanned them, settling on a ledge with sturdy, thick brush, not unlike the species within which he currently concealed himself. Colt marked the position as his fighting ground, as the site offered a good view of the surrounding acreage, and, what was more, formed a natural nest for the skilled rifleman to perform his deadly business unobserved. Colt dismounted the bay and tethered the beast to a spruce branch without word or sound, then drew from the saddle's scabbard a repeating rifle of an unusually long barrelage, an instrument Colt had obtained during his tenure as a cavalryman in the army of our good republic. Like Jaith, Colt had spent 4 years fighting the Grews, although child-minding, as Jaith had once put it, was the more apt description. Much to the disappointment of the brothers, there was very little fighting the Grews to be done in the days succeeding the Prophet's War, and of the minor skirmishes that seldom arose by the time they had sworn oaths to commander and country, to these events they were excluded. The sharp mountain air cut across Colt's face, his neck, nose, and ears taking the brunt of the discomfort. He pulled the brim of his felt hat low over his eyes and latched up the topmost buttons of the army-issue coat he wore. The coat was dyed the standard free green, spun of wool, and boasted in a single row of brass buttons falling down the center. The insignia of the enlisted man, first class, flashed on the ranking arm, but that noteworthy sigil, like the rest of Colt's raiment, was weather-beaten and discolored from long hours on the trail and the decay of time. In truth, Colt had not worn the article in these 12 years estranged from Jaith, yet the stitching held up, and he was grateful for that fact given the circumstance. By the calendar, spring proper had well fallen over the Western Theater, though it seemed that the fair season could not shed the icy tendrils of its predecessor. The angels had proclaimed the land was dying, an effect produced by separation from their idol god. But Colt Doom chalked these explanations up to nothing more than Grew superstitions. Colt loathed the angels more than most. 4 years posted in the so-called havens, arbitrating their petty domestic conflicts, clipping wing feathers, and testing one's patience instructing such a primitive lot in the ways of husbandry would do that. And never ye mind their dark magics, backwards religion, and queer proverbs, Colt thought. But ain't that why you come all this way? Another thought said back. Colt shrugged the notion off with a sneer. Opening his possibles pouch, Colt gathered a small pewter flask and pulled the stopper free. A cone of golden light blushed from the receptacle's mouth, and he squinted at the oozy fluid within through his single eye. Colt wondered how the elixir was made for the 100th time, then reminded himself that he did not want to know. He flung back the flask and swallowed all that was left of the sludgy tonic, and it went down gruel sour and glycerin sharp. Immediately the effects began to take hold. The gloom of night became bright as day, muscles swelling with the thews of youth. No, it mattered not how the potion was made. That was for the wizards to know. For the wizards. Keeping a good distance from the homestead, at least a mile between it and himself, Colt marched over stone, around bush, and through copse. The rifle he slung across his back, and the possibles swayed by a long cord about the chest. When the terrain acutely steepened, Colt huffed in the night's cold, sweat gliding off his dusky features. Though the man had fallen out of conditioning long ago, the drink turned back the years 62. Once, in the epochs of youth, when he had been full of gravel and hasty to prove himself, Colt had climbed many miles of such-like earthworks without needing so much as a drop of the stuff. No longer was he that man, and Colt Doom released a silent boon to the gods that the elixir worked just as well in his aim as it did his snap. At first the effect did not register with Colt Doom, but when the mind caught up with reality, the body followed suit, and pain flared speedily throughout his complete being with an intensity that sucked the breath from his lungs and the power from his soul. Colt expelled a cry that echoed up and down the mountain, a shout that might have set off an avalanche if the snowfall were a particle heavier. He collapsed to the ground, grasping for what was quickly identified to be an iron-toothed bear trap clapped about his foot. Blood oozed in the same measure as pain felt, casting a dizzying hex on the faculties. Colt pried frantically at the contraption's jaws, hoping the potion might give him the strength needed to emancipate himself. But, if he had thought rationally in that desperate moment, Colt Doom may have determined this course of action would only compound his predicament. And compound the predicament it did, and the man delivered an encore of his previous moan when the heavy maw smacked down on his leg a second time. "Dashed fool! Jaith'll have heard! Jaith'll come!" Colt glanced back at the cabin, though nothing bestirred there still. An oddity indeed, as Colt previously noted. Perhaps Jaith truly was away. Such a turn of fortune might afford Colt the spell needed to liberate himself undetected.
"No, Jaith's about. Jaith's watching, waiting, biding his time. Get yourself out."
But how? Colt almost spoke the question aloud as he examined his predicament with a newfound prudence. The solution struck him like an arrow. The springs! On either side of the trap's maw, the spring mechanisms fanned out in two wings of bowed iron. The ardent trapper only needed to compress them simultaneously to disarm the device. Now, what complicated matters for Colt Doom was this. While the use of Colt's free leg allowed him to compress one of the aforementioned springs, the other leg, obviously obstructed, prohibited his ability to complete the essential second spring compression. What made matters worse was that there seemed no viable means to substitute the use of his immobilized limb with that of another, like a hand per se, for not enough leverage could be applied to both springs due to his very limited range of motion.
"Figure it out. What can you do?"
Another idea penetrated Colt's thoughts, this time faster than before, and Colt removed the possibles pouch from about his neck and eyed the length of its strap. The strip was long, thick, and cut from rawhide, making it stronger than leather, and he wondered if such sturdiness was enough. He then drew forth his boot knife and cut the rawhide strap from the pouch and wound it about one of the springs as tightly as his muscles allowed. He kept one eye on the cabin as he worked, breath hot and smoky, the sour stench of sweat and the coppery stink of blood curling up his nostrils all the while. Once the rawhide was twisted tight, Colt drew the big lock pistol from his belt and employed its barrel as a winch, continuing to tighten the strap until the spring compressed and held. Then, using his free foot, Colt Doom compressed the second spring and removed the machine with a painful gasp. The wound looked grave. The trap had bitten right through Colt's boot, and upon removing the footwear, he was made privy to just how deep its teeth had sunk, practically to the bone. If Colt had, by a bizarre wisdom, decidedly gone barefoot on his quest like some beast of the field, or, perhaps, had he refused the wizard's potion hitherto consumed, undoubtedly the blow would have sliced the member clean off. Colt unwound the rawhide from the spring and coiled it about his injury, sliding his boot back on with many curses. How could he have been so thoughtless? Of course Jaith Doom would have employed traps. Why, it's just what he himself would have done were things the opposite. How could he have missed it?
"Not thinking, that's how."
Presently, Colt lacked the supplies to treat a perilous injury to his person. The medicinal kit he had left stowed with the bay, bringing along extra munitions alone. Nay, what Colt had done would have to do, for now it was time to reclaim his ground. Colt rolled prone and crawled uphill, using his knee, hands, and good foot to push himself along. Now and again he stopped and checked the house and listened to the air.
"All a trick,"
he reminded his soul. Jaith was waiting for him, and if he failed to establish the advantageous position soon, no doubt that pernicious brother would prove the victor in all that was to come.
Hi, hi, your dog."
By and by, Colt Doom scrambled over the lip of that brushy overlook of choice, and he rolled onto his back and heaved when he reached the spot. And he would have lied there unto death were he a quitting man, yielding to the exhaustion and pain of his catastrophic accident. Yet Colt did neither of those things, and, forcing himself prone again, he leveled the rifle and peered through the glass and scanned the entirety of the homestead from his fighting ground. All was quiet yet.
"Maybe he's gone trapping after all."
Then it happened.